The WHO declares Ebola emergency. Outbreak spreads across the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda. On May 17th, the WHO declared the Ebola virus disease outbreak caused by the something strain?
Bundibugyo.
Bundibugyo strain. Okay. Disease outbreak caused by the Bundibugyo strain in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda, a public health emergency of international concern with over 500 suspected cases and approximately 130 to 139 deaths reported as of May 19th, 20th. Yeah, I heard about there was a plane that was going to the US, but one of the people on the plane was coming from the DRC or Uganda or something, and so the plane itself got diverted and it ended up landing in Ottawa because someone you couldn't take a direct flight from the Congo to the US or something. Ebola. Okay. Now I am not familiar with my diseases, so what is Ebola? Is it contagious from person to person? How contagious is it? And I heard about a flight from the Congo to the US that was diverted to Canada. Can you give me more details? Yeah, okay. Ebola virus disease is a rare but severe, often fatal illness in humans. It originates in wild animals, like fruit bats and non-human primates, and spills over into human populations. Once inside the body, the virus damages the immune system and organs, eventually causing blood clotting levels to drop, which can lead to severe, uncontrollable internal and external bleeding. The current outbreak in Central Africa is linked to the Bundibugyo strain of the virus. This specific strain is particularly challenging because, unlike some other strains of Ebola, there are currently no approved vaccines or specific antiviral treatments available for it. Is it contagious? Yes, Ebola is highly contagious, but only under very specific conditions. It does not spread the way respiratory viruses like the flu or COVID 19 do. No airborne transmission, direct contact only. Spreads exclusively through direct contact via broken skin or mucous membranes in the eyes, nose, or mouth. With the blood or bodily fluid, sweat, saliva, vomit, urine, feces of a person who is sick with or has died from Ebola. It can also spread via objects contaminated with these fluids, like needles or clothing. The symptoms rule. A person with Ebola cannot transmit the virus if they do not have symptoms. Okay, so that's completely different. With the more traditional respiratory viruses, you're most infectious kind of like right before you start to show symptoms, because that's when you're not being careful. You yourself don't know you have it, and that's when it's most likely to spread it to someone else. But this one, if they do not show symptoms, they're not infectious. The incubation period, the time from infection to showing signs, is typically 2 to 21 days. That's quite a window. A person only becomes contagious after they begin developing generic symptoms like sudden fever, aches, severe headache, or sore throat. Okay. The flight diversion to Canada. The rumors about a diverted flight are true, but it was a matter of strict immigration paperwork and safety enforcement, not a medical emergency. On Wednesday, May 20th, so yesterday, Air France flight was traveling from Paris to Detroit, Michigan. While the plane was in flight, U.S. Customs and Border Protection realized that a passenger from the Democratic Republic of the Congo had been allowed to board the plane in error in Paris. Here are the details of what follows. The ban. Just days earlier, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Department of Homeland Security implemented strict temporary travel restrictions. Under these rules, foreign passenger passport holders who have been in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, or South Sudan within the last 21 days are barred from entering the country unless funneled through a specific screening airport. Washington. The diversion because the passengers boarded mistakenly and Detroit was not equipped with a designated screening point under the new rules. U.S. authorities denied the aircraft permission to enter American airspace. The flight was forced to divert and land in Montreal, Canada. No medical emergency. Air France and public health officials confirmed there was no medical emergency or sick passengers on board. The outcome. Upon landing in Montreal, Public Health Agency of Canada quarantine officer evaluated the traveler and confirmed they were completely asymptomatic, meaning they pose zero risk of spreading the virus to fellow passengers. Because remember, for this one, if you don't show symptoms, you can't spread it. Passengers was promptly placed on a flight back to Paris, and the rest of the passengers on flight 378 safety continued their journey to Dubai. Okay, so doesn't sound like much happened. But the fact that the US has already implemented strict temporary travel restrictions, like, it means they definitely don't have this under control yet, this outbreak of Ebola. Ebola, if I remember correctly, is the one that, like, the prime vector for it is water, contaminated water. Like someone who's sick and then they vomit and then washed into a water supply, and then everyone that drinks from the water supply can get sick. And that's the scary vector. Okay. Did I get through all this? I think so. The Bungio strain is rarer and less studied than the Zarin strain. The geographic spread, including to 2 national capitals and delayed detection, are deeply concerning. With the DRC already in complex humanitarian emergency and the region under resourced, this has genuine pandemic escalation potential if not contained quickly. Really? How bad can Ebola get? What's the worst outbreak we've seen? Have a look. Ebola is widely considered one of the most deadliest human infections on the planet. When it gets bad, it progresses rapidly from flu-like discomfort to total systematic failure. How bad can it get? The virus targets the lining of the blood vessels and critical organs. As it replicates, it triggers an overwhelming inflammatory response. Health officials often categorize Ebola symptoms in 2 phases. The dry phase. This occurs during the first few days, marked by a sudden, intense fever, severe headache, muscle weakness, and a debilitating sore throat. The wet phase. As the virus progresses, patients suffer from severe vomiting and explosive diarrhea, leading to extreme, life-threatening dehydration. In its most severe forms, life-threatening dehydration. Like, you just can't keep water in the body because you're vomiting and pooping continuously. Like that is horrible. In its most severe forms, the virus destroys the body's ability to clot blood. This leads to internal bleeding and visible hemorrhaging, such as bleeding from the gums, nose, eyes, or injection sites. Ultimately, death usually happens within 6 to 60 days of the first symptoms, typically driven by severe dehydration, low, low blood pressure, and multi organ failure. Historically, depending on the strain of the virus and the quality of hospital care available, the death rates have hovered around 50%, but it has spiked as high as 90% in remote, resource poor areas. Whoa. Like as high as 97. Okay, this song's got too much beat. Alright, which one is it? Upbeat Summer. Not ill. Okay, so the death rate has hovered around 50%, but it has spiked as high as 90% in remote, resource poor areas. That is terrifying. Okay, the worst outbreak in history. West Africa. 2014, 2016. The absolute worst outbreak the world has ever seen was the West African epidemic, which began in late 2013 and lasted until 2016. These things can go on for years. What? Before this event, Ebola had only ever popped up in remote, isolated Central African villages where it would flare up and burn out quickly. The 2014 outbreak was catastrophic because it hit highly mobile populations in major, densely populated cities. The epicenter, Guana, Libera, and Sierra Leone. Over 99% of cases. Total cases 28,000. Total deaths 11,000. Deadliest known. Why it got so bad? The scale of disaster completely overwhelmed local healthcare systems. Clinics lacked beds, protective gears, and clean water. Furthermore, traditional burial practices, which involved washing and touching the highly contagious bodies of deceased loved ones, drove massive community spikes before public health teams could intervene. Whoa. The traditional burial practices involving washing and touching the highly contagious bodies before you bury them drove massive community spikes before the public health teams could. It remains the largest, most complex Ebola outbreak since the virus was first discovered in 1960, resulting in more cases and deaths than all other outbreaks in history combined. 11,000. The current outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. How many people have been infected there? How many people have died? They said, if I remember correctly, like 100, 111 deaths, 113. Means you're still two integrals off the worst one. The current Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is developing rapidly because it was only officially identified and declared a public health emergency of international concern by the World Health Organization last week. Health agencies are dealing with a mix of highly fluid numbers. As of the latest global situation update, the figures for the DRC stands as follow. Current case and death count. Suspected and confirmed cases, approximately 600 cases have been reported. Of these, 51 are laboratory confirmed. The remaining cases are listed as suspected because health workers on the ground are tracking everyone showing clinical symptoms within the hot zones. Total death, at least 100 139 people have died from the virus so far. So if we use that, what is this, like a 40% death rate? But this was a more deadly strain. Okay, so we don't know. So they think there's approximately 600 cases, 139 have died so far. Why controlling this outbreak is proving difficult. Public health agencies, including the African CDC and the WHO, are extremely concerned about this specific flare up for 3 distinct reasons. The wrong strain bottleneck. The primary reason the numbers jump so quickly is that early diagnostic tests were looking for the more common Zeri strain of the Ebola, the one that flared up in West Africa. Because this outbreak is being caused by the rarer Bungio strain. Those initial tests came back as false negatives. Local teams lost a week of response time before realizing that they were dealing with, allowing the virus to quietly spread. No vaccine runaway. For the common Zeri strain, medical teams can deploy highly effective vaccines to create a buffer zone around an outbreak. Oh, so kind of like to contain it, you deploy the vaccine to communities around the problem. For this Bungio strain, there is no approved vaccine or specific antiviral therapy, meaning containment relies entirely on strict isolation, contact tracing, and supportive hospital care. Complicated geography. The epicenter is in the Ichuar province in northeastern DRC. Ituri is a highly volatile region dealing with an active armed conflict. Well, I mean, that's gonna make it difficult to contain. I'd say that's gonna make it very difficult to contain. An active armed conflict and mass population displacement, which means, from my understanding, the primary vector is contaminated water. Like, you can get it directly from touching someone, but if you know there's an outbreak, reduce contact, but you still have to drink water. Contaminated water is dangerous. Furthermore, and especially if you have like a migrating population, and you're not able to like boil the water consistently, then that's when you can run into the large vectors. But furthermore, the outbreak has taken root around major gold mining towns, which see a massive daily influx and outflow of mobile workers. That is dangerous. It's the equivalent of putting people on airplanes. The virus has already traveled along major transit corridors. A few cases have spilled over the border into neighboring Uganda. Okay, so only a few cases are in Uganda. And health teams are actively tracking a confirmed case in Joma, a massive transit hub on the Rwandan border, in an urgent effort to keep the virus from expanding into a wider regional crisis. Ah, okay, so this is the talking about that plane. So there was no indication at all that the guy had Ebola. Literally, he was just from the Democratic Republic of the Congo on a plane for the US. And they're like, no, this could be a bad one. Okay, I'll watch this on it. The BBC News.
The World Health Organization says that the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa is spreading faster and more widely than previously thought.
Democratic Republic of the Congo. Map. Massive country. That's right. We've heard Rwanda and Uganda as the other two nations that they've cited. So we're looking at this area, right? Just massive place. Maybe I can put this down in Uganda, not in the DRC at all. Rwanda as well. Nation over here, Kenya has a lot more. Here, let's just have a look. I mean, that does not exactly look sanitary. Like, that's how it travels, right? Unsanitary conditions. Like, if that's where you got to get your water from, that is dangerous. And this is the big city where they actually have roads for the Google truck to drive. Cool. I missed a click there. Where's this? We were going this way. Drive. This is Rwanda. Oh, that's the end. That's the end of the road. No, we were in Uganda. Let's go up here in Uganda. I mean, that's beautiful. They doing drone footage. There was nowhere in the DRC, right? Yeah. I like just looking at roads. That. There's the Google truck. Oh, back to Uganda. I mean, that place looks. Clearly, those are back roads. But yeah, this is the kind of region that the outbreak's happening in, right? Probably even more rural, because we're looking at their city. We're looking at the city here, Kampala. A built up area. Like, this place doesn't look bad. Climbing a hill, nice building at the top of it. Generation N cinema. Nightmare traffic. Gas stations look the same everywhere, huh? Okay. Let's continue. Where was I? We just started a video.
131 people have died and more than 500 are infected.
Here we go, because remember that's Uganda. It's crossed over there. Roma, that's a ways away. That's the gold spreading thing, right? Traveling around from Gold Town.
Mostly in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Cases are emerging in more towns and cities there, and the disease has also spread to neighbouring Uganda. An outbreak in West Africa.
Quite literally the city we were just looking at, Kampala.
In 2014 claimed more than 11,000 lives. Well, I'm joined now by Sir Peter Horby, epidemiologist and director of Pandemic Sciences Institute at Oxford University. Thanks very much for being with us. What's the latest information that we have, and how concerning is it to see this continued spread?
Thanks, Gita. It's a fast-moving situation, and what we're seeing is that it's only been, a week since it was first diagnosed. It's this particular strain of Ebola virus, Bundibugyo, and the testing of cases is accelerating, but the positivity rate is quite high. So amongst the cases, the suspected cases being tested, roughly 50-60% are testing positive, which is suggesting that actually the outbreak is quite widespread in that area. And so it's a significant concern, particularly for DRC, but also.
So they were using the wrong tests initially, testing for the wrong strain. That kind of let it get a head start on the World Health Organization.
For neighbouring countries.
Are actions being taken now, even if at the start of this outbreak they weren't? Because this is a different strain to previous Ebola outbreaks, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very challenging outbreak because it looks like it's fairly extensive from the information that's coming in. It's in a difficult place. We've seen cases in big urban settings. There's quite large populations in those areas. There's insecurity with rebel groups and fighting. There's a lot of cross-border movement. There's displaced people from the conflict. So it's a difficult place to work. And with around 500 suspected cases, you're talking potentially many thousands of contacts that need tracing in a very difficult place. So
how do you trace in somewhere like that, especially when you already have like 600 cases? And some of them are moving between like gold mining towns. That like contact tracing is going to be really difficult.
There's a huge amount of activity going on now in terms of trying to control transmission and make sure that it doesn't spread any further.
And how much can the international community help in this, as you said, very, very difficult circumstances?
Well, the first priority is, identifying as many cases as possible, getting them appropriate care and isolating them, then tracing their contacts to put them in quarantine or put them under monitoring so that we can stop the transmission. The next sort of big area is communicating with the public in the affected areas and other areas to make sure they, are fully engaged in the response, and then international coordination, because we obviously have cases already in Uganda. There's borders with other countries like South Sudan, and there's travel within the region by buses and overboard and by plane. So international coordination to make sure that everyone else is ready in case it does spread to other regions.
And what is the chance of it spreading, do you think, beyond this immediate geographic area? We've seen, obviously, wider global concerns to try to limit that.
Well, the risk to, I think, immediate neighbouring countries is high. That area of the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's a big country, but the countries bordering it on the eastern.
Yeah, where's our map? So there's already been a case here. It looks like this is where it's concentrated, but it's traveled down here too. That's a massive city. Okay, so these are cities too that are getting. Okay, well, that's the courtyard. Let's see. Yeah. Not gonna be able to see much of it. It's probably quite similar to the one we were looking at over here, if not smaller, Kampala. Yeah, pretty large. Hey, they've got actual shops and stuff up here. Okay.
inside of DRC, there's a high risk, I think, of cases crossing the border. Beyond that, the risk is low, but it's not zero, because there is, international travel obviously means that, as we saw in 2014, you can get cases flying long distances and coming into other countries. But it's not that transmissible if we're vigilant.
That's why the US has put a ban, right? They shut travel down completely.
And we do the correct screening, particularly of people with fevers and illnesses from potentially affected areas, then it's a readily containable infection.
Okay. So he's saying that it is a containable infection. Cases are still, from what we can see, quite a bit lower than that big outbreak they had. But with the new strain, like you never know. Has it become more transmissible or not? Okay, well, it's something we're gonna have to keep our eye on, because it does have the potential